Elara had survived wars, crossed forbidden realms, and tamed fire itself, but nothing prepared her for the moment. A human child looked up at her with glowing eyes and whispered, "Dad said you'd come." She hadn't come for anyone. She'd come to forget. The cafe hummed with the soft chatter of a dozen species, their voices blending into a comforting blur. Elara sat alone at a corner table, her fingers tracing the rim of a ceramic cup filled with something the humans called coffee. It was bitter, sharp, and oddly grounding. She liked it. Her twin dragons, Embir and Ashwing, coiled around her feet beneath the table, small enough now to pass as exotic pets. Though their scales shimmered with barely contained heat, they sensed her unease. They always did. She was supposed to meet someone here. A contact. A trade for rare ores mined from the outer colonies. It was business, nothing more. But the human she'd been messaging, someone named Carter, hadn't shown. 15 minutes late. Typical. Elara considered leaving. Then she felt a tug at her sleeve. She looked down. A little girl stood beside her table, human, maybe 6 years old. Her dark curls framed a face smudged with dust, and her clothes were worn but clean. But it was her eyes that stopped Elara cold. They weren't quite right. Too bright. Too aware. "You sat at the wrong table, Dad," the girl said softly. Elara blinked. "I'm not. He said you'd be here." The girl's voice trembled. "He said you'd help." Elara glanced around the cafe. No one seemed to notice them. No frantic parent. No guardian. Just the child, standing there with a desperation that made Elara's chest tighten. "Where is your father?" Elara asked gently, crouching to the girl's level. The girl's lip quivered. "Gone. They took him." "Who took him?" "The bad men. With the ships." Elara's stomach dropped. Ships. That could mean smugglers, pirates, or worse, slavers. The outer territories were lawless, and human settlements were prime targets. Embir hissed softly, her small head poking out from beneath the table. The girl's eyes widened, but instead of fear, wonder spread across her face. "Dragons," she breathed. Elara felt something shift inside her. She didn't know this child. Didn't know her anything. But the way the girl looked at her, like she was the answer to a prayer, made it impossible to walk away. "What's your name?" Elara asked. "Mira." "Mira, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Mira nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "My dad, his name is Carter. He works on the docks. He said he was meeting someone today. An elf, for trade. But when I came to bring him his lunch, I saw them drag him onto a ship. He told me to run. To find the elf at the cafe. Table 7. Elara's blood ran cold. Carter, the contact. He'd been taken because of her. She stood, her mind already racing. "Do you know which ship?" Mira shook her head. "But I heard them say a name, the Void Claw." Elara's jaw tightened. She knew that name. A pirate vessel notorious for kidnapping skilled laborers and selling them to colonies that didn't ask questions. If Carter was on that ship, he had hours, maybe less, before he disappeared forever. "Stay close to me," Elara said, her voice firm. She reached for her COM device and sent a quick message to her ships as II. "Prepare for departure. Emergency extraction." Mira grabbed her hand, her small fingers cold and trembling. "You'll help him?" Elara looked down at the girl. At the hope in her eyes. At the trust she had no right to give. "I will," Elara said, and she meant it. The docks were a maze of rusted metal and flickering lights. Elara moved through the shadows with Mira at her side. Embir and Ashwing prowling ahead like silent sentinels. The air reeked of fuel and salt, and the distant hum of engines vibrated through the metal grating beneath their feet. Elara's sharp eyes scanned the ships docked along the pier. Most were civilian transports or small traders. But at the far end, half hidden behind a stack of cargo containers, sat a vessel that matched the description. The Void Claw. Its hull was scarred and patched, painted matte black to blend into the void. No lights, no crew visible. But Elara could feel it, the tension in the air, the sense of something waiting. "Stay here," she whispered to Mira, guiding her behind a crate. "No," Myra said, her voice small but fierce. "I'm coming." Elara studied her, saw the determination, the fear, the love. "Then stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Mira nodded. Elara drew a slim blade from her belt, elven steel, etched with runes that glowed faintly in the dark. Embir and Ashwing flanked her, their bodies beginning to glow with inner fire. She stepped toward the ship, and then the lights went out. The darkness was absolute. Elara froze, her hand instinctively reaching back to shield Mira. The docks had gone silent, too silent. No hum of machinery, no distant voices, just the sound of her own heartbeat, and the faint crackle of heat from her dragons. Then she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. "Elara." "Of the Ashwood Court," a voice called out from the shadows, male, human, amused. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Elara's grip tightened on her blade. "Where is Carter?" A laugh echoed through the darkness. "Safe, for now. But you're not here for him, are you? You're here for the girl." Elara's blood turned to ice. "Let them go." "Oh, I will. For a price." The lights flickered back on, harsh, blinding. Elara squinted, her vision adjusting. A man stood at the top of the Void Claw's boarding ramp. Tall, scarred, with cold eyes and a plasma rifle slung over his shoulder. Behind him, more figures emerged. Armed, waiting. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, Elf," the man said. "Carter was supposed to bring me something. A map, coordinates to an old human outpost. But he got clever. Hid it. Said he'd only give it to you." Elara's mind raced. A map, that's what this was about. Carter had information valuable enough to get him killed. "I don't have it," Elara said evenly. "I know." The man smiled. "But the girl does." Elara's heart stopped. She felt Myra's hand tighten around hers. "She doesn't know anything," Elara said, her voice cold. "Maybe, maybe not. But I'm not taking chances." He raised the rifle. "Hand her over, and I'll let you walk." Embir snarled, flames licking at her jaws. Ashwing's wings spread wide, heat radiating from his scales. Elara stepped forward, placing herself between the man and Mira. "You'll have to go through me." The man sighed. "I was hoping you'd say that." He fired. The plasma bolt screamed through the air, a streak of superheated light that turned the darkness into noon. Elara's instincts took over centuries of training compressed into a single heartbeat. She twisted, pulling Mira down with her as the shot seared past, close enough that she felt her hair singe. The dock plate where they'd stood a moment before glowed red hot, melting into slag. "Run!" Elara shouted, but Mira was already moving, small feet pounding against metal as she darted behind a stack of cargo containers. Embyr, and Ashwin didn't wait for orders. They'd fought beside Elara long enough to know her mind, to anticipate her movements. Embir launched herself at the nearest guard, a blur of crimson scales and white-hot fury. The man barely had time to scream before her jaws clamped around his rifle, melting it into useless scrap. Ashwin took to the air, his wings beating hard against the recycled atmosphere of the dock. He was larger than his sister, built for power rather than speed, and when he dove at the second guard, it was like watching a meteor strike. Claws raked across armor plating, leaving glowing furrows in their wake. Elara didn't watch. She was already moving, her blade singing as she sprinted toward the boarding ramp. The scarred man, their leader, tracked her with his rifle, but he was too slow. She was elven, and elves didn't run. They flowed. She closed the distance in 3 heartbeats. Her blade met his rifle barrel just as he fired. The plasma bolt went wild, scorching a line across the Void Claw's hull. Elara twisted her wrist, leveraging the blade against the rifle's weight, and the weapon clattered from his hands, but he was fast. Faster than she'd expected for a human. He didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped into her guard, one hand catching her wrist, the other driving toward her throat. Elara bent backward, her elven flexibility turning what should have been a killing blow into a near miss. She felt his knuckles graze her collarbone, felt the raw strength behind the strike. This wasn't some dock thug. This man was trained. Professional. Dangerous. She brought her knee up, aiming for his ribs, but he turned, taking the blow on his hip. They separated, circling each other on the boarding ramp. Around them, chaos reigned. Embir had set a second guard's pants on fire, and he was rolling on the ground, screaming. Ashwing had cornered 3 more against a bulkhead, his maw open wide, showing teeth like daggers. "Impressive," the man said, breathing hard. "But you're outnumbered." "So are you," Elara replied. He laughed. "You think 2 dragons are enough? I think you underestimate what they can do." As if on cue, Embir roared a sound that echoed across the docks, primal and fierce. And then she exhaled. Fire poured from her jaws, not the focused lance of heat she used in combat, but a wide, rolling wave of flame that washed over the boarding ramp. The guards scattered, some diving for cover, others simply running. The scarred man cursed and threw himself backward into the ship. Elara didn't follow. "Not yet." She turned, scanning the dock for Mira. "Over here." The small voice came from behind a container marked with hazard symbols. Elara's heart lurched. If those containers held fuel or explosives, stay there. Elara called. "Don't move." She sprinted toward the containers, Embir and Ashwing falling into formation beside her. The scarred man was shouting orders from inside the ship, and Elara heard the distinctive whine of more weapons powering up. They had seconds. Maybe less. She reached the containers and found Mira pressed against the cold metal, her small body trembling. But her eyes, those strange, 2 bright eyes, were steady. "He's lying," Mira said quietly. Elara knelt beside her. "About what?" "About my dad. He doesn't have him. Not on that ship. How do you know?" "I can feel it." Mira pressed a hand to her chest. "Dad and I were connected. He's far away, but he's alive." Elara studied the girl. There was something about her, something that didn't quite fit. The way she'd made that guard hesitate earlier. The glow in her hands. And now this claiming she could sense her father across vast distances. "What are you, Mira?" The girl's lip trembled. "I don't know. Dad never told me. He said it was safer if I didn't know." A plasma bolt slammed into the container above them, showering them with sparks. Elara grabbed Mira and rolled, coming up in a crouch. The Void Claw's weapons were online now, automated turrets tracking across the dock. This was going from bad to worse. "Can you run?" Elara asked. Mira nodded. "Then run, now. Get to the far side of the dock and hide. I'll find you. What about you?" Elara smiled, though it felt more like baring teeth. "I'm going to teach these pirates why you don't threaten children." Mira hesitated, then threw her arms around Elara's neck in a fierce hug. "Don't die. I don't plan to." Mira ran, and Elara watched just long enough to see her disappear into the maze of containers and equipment. Then she turned back to the Void Claw. Embir and Ashwing flanked her, their bodies glowing with inner fire. "Ready?" she asked them. They answered with flame. Elara charged the boarding ramp, her blade held low, her dragon surging ahead. The automated turret swiveled, tracking them, and opened fire. But Ashwin was already moving, his wings spread wide, creating a shield of superheated air that turned the plasma bolts into harmless light. Embir darted left, then right, too fast for the turrets to track. She reached the first one and latched onto it with her claws, pumping heat into the metal until it warped and failed. Elara reached the ramp and vaulted over a fallen guard, landing in the ship's cargo bay. It was dark inside, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of red. Crates were stacked haphazardly, and the air smelled of oil and ozone. "You're persistent," the scarred man's voice echoed from deeper in the ship. "I'll give you that. Where's Carter?" Elara demanded. "I told you, safe, for now. But if you keep pushing, you'll what? Kill him? You need him alive. You need what he knows." Silence. "Then, you're smarter than I gave you credit for." Elara moved deeper into the cargo bay, her senses on high alert. Embir and Ashwing stayed close, their heat providing light in the darkness. "So let's make a deal," the man continued. "You back off. Let me leave. And I'll tell you where Carter really is. And Mira? She stays out of it. I have no interest in the girl." Elara didn't believe him. But she also knew she was running out of time. Every moment she spent here was another moment. Mira was alone on the docks. "Fine," she said. "Tell me where he is." "Station Epsilon. Holding cells. Level 3. Station Epsilon. A notorious black market hub on the edge of the sector. If Carter was there, getting him out would be nearly impossible. How do I know you're telling the truth?" "You don't. But what choice do you have?" Before Elara could respond, she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. Ship's engine. Close. Too close. She spun and ran back to the cargo ramp, emerging just in time to see a sleek vessel descending from the sky. Its hull marked with military insignia, human military. The scarred man appeared beside her, his expression grim. "Wow, this just got interesting." A voice boomed across the docks. "This is Lieutenant Commander Brooke Hayes of the Terran Defense Coalition. All hostile parties, stand down immediately." Elara looked at the man. "Friends of yours?" He snorted. "Hardly." And for the first time since this nightmare began, Elara saw something unexpected in his eyes. Fear. The plasma bolt screamed through the air. Elara moved on instinct, shoving Mira down as the shot seared past her shoulder. Heat kissed her skin, singeing fabric. She rolled, her blade flashing as she came up in a crouch. Ember and Ashwing exploded into action. Embir lunged at the nearest guard, her jaws snapping shut on his rifle. It melted in her grip, molten metal dripping to the ground. Ashwin took to the air, wings beating hard as he dove at another attacker, claws raking the cross armor. Elara didn't wait. She sprinted toward the ramp, her blade singing as it met the first guard's weapon. Steel clashed. Sparks flew. She twisted, disarmed him, and drove her knee into his gut. He crumpled. "Get the girl." The leader shouted. 2 guards broke off, heading for Myra. "No." Elara's voice was a roar. She hurled her blade. It spun through the air and embedded itself in the shoulder of the nearest guard. He screamed and fell, but the second one reached Mira. Mira didn't run. She stood her ground, her small fists clenched, her eyes blazing with a light that wasn't entirely human. "Don't touch me," she said. And then she glowed. Light burst from her hands, pure, searing, blinding. The guard stumbled back, shielding his eyes, and in that moment, Embir was on him. Flames engulfed his legs. He dropped, rolling to extinguish the fire. Elara reached Mira, pulling her close. "Are you hurt?" Mira shook her head, her breathing ragged. "I didn't mean to. It's okay." Elara's voice was soft, steady. "You did what you had to." The leader cursed, raising his rifle again, but before he could fire, a new sound cut through the chaos. A ship's engine. Close. Too close. Elara looked up. A sleek vessel descended from the sky, its hull marked with human military insignia. A voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "This is Lieutenant Commander Brooke Hayes of the Terran Defense Coalition. Stand down or be neutralized." The leader's face twisted with rage. He fired at the descending ship and was met with a barrage of suppression fire that tore through the Voidclaw's hull. Explosions rocked the docks. Guards scattered. Elara grabbed Mira and ran. They found Carter in a storage bay, bound but alive. When he saw Mira, tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered as Elara cut his restraints. "I thought I could protect her." "I thought you did," Elara said firmly. "She's safe." Carter pulled Mira into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. Later, as the TDC secured the area, Commander Hayes approached Elara. She was young, sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that demanded respect. "You handled yourself well," Hayes said. "I had help," Elara replied. Glancing at her dragons, Hayes smiled faintly. "Carter told me what you did. Not many would risk themselves for strangers." "She wasn't a stranger," Elara said quietly. "Not after she looked at me and chose to trust." Hayes extended a hand. "If you ever need allies, the Coalition could use someone like you." Elara shook it. "I'll keep that in mind." As the sun rose over the docks, Elara watched Carter and Mira walk away together. Safe, whole dot, and for the first time in a long time. She felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Subscribe for more epic sci-fi stories. Let the stars guide your next adventure.